This came minutes after the state election body announced President Ali Bongo had won a third term. Appearing on national television, the military officers said they represent all security and defense forces in the Central African nation. They also claimed the poll results were nullified and the government institutions have been dissolved indefinitely. As per reports, Gabon's borders have also been closed until further notice. Russian Defense Ministry has reported that the armed Ukrainian drones targeted an airport in the city of Pskov in the early hours of Wednesday. Moscow said that it also shot down drones over the regions of Orlov, Bryansk, Ryazan and Kaluga. Now, this is seen as the biggest drone strike on Russian territory since Moscow's full-scale invasion began last year. Ukraine has stepped up its drone warfare in recent months, often hitting targets deep inside Russian territory. Russian media also reported that 4 heavy transport aircrafts were damaged at the airfield in Pskov. The scale of the damage to the airport has not been revealed yet. According to a new study released by UNICEF, more than 1,300 schools have been destroyed in Ukraine since the Russian invasion began last year. UNICEF has also expressed that more than half of the children whose families have fled due to the conflict to other countries are not enrolled in the schools due to language barriers. Separately, the study says some schools have suffered direct hits and others have closed down as a precaution against missile and artillery attacks on residential areas across the country. It also highlights that around half of Ukraine's teachers have reported a deterioration in students' abilities in language, reading and mathematics. According to Turkish media reports, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan may visit Russia to discuss the Black Sea grain initiative with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Turkish media quoted sources as saying that Erdogan and Putin will hold a meeting in the Russian Black Sea resort city of Sochi. The Black Sea Grain Initiative expired on July 17th when Moscow announced it had suspended its participation in the agreement. The deal had been brokered by Turkey and the UN between Russia and Ukraine in July 2022. It allowed Ukraine to export its grain and other agricultural products from its Black Sea ports. US Secretary of State Gina Raimondo has said that much more than just communication is needed between Beijing and Washington. This comes as the two countries have agreed to begin a commercial issues working group to meet several times a year. The Commerce Secretary also emphasized that the US and China have a massive, consequential economic relationship. Raimondo is the first US commerce chief to visit China in 5 years. She is also the latest Biden administration official to visit the country in a bid to strengthen communications, particularly on economy and defense. British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is on an official visit in China. During the trip, Cleverly met with Chinese Vice President Han Zheng. Cleverly is the first senior British minister in 5 years to visit China. Cleverly has expressed that this visit can reset ties between the two countries after years of tension over security, investment and human rights concerns. The Foreign Secretary has argued it would be a mistake to isolate the world's second largest economy or tackle climate change without its inputs. However, Cleverly's visit has been criticized by some lawmakers in the governing Conservative Party. The Biden administration will send an additional $250 million in weapons and ammunition to Ukraine as part of its ongoing support of Kyiv's counteroffensive. Now, this package is set to include mine-clearing equipment, artillery and rocket rounds, ambulances and medical gear, among other items. Ukraine has already received more than $43 billion of aid from the US since Russia's invasion began last year. Now, these funds have already helped Ukraine procure weapons like howitzers and millions of rounds of ammunition. Since the war is now in its 18th month, much of the ammunition and weaponry has already been used up. US President Joe Biden has announced a list of 10 prescription medicines that will be subject to first ever price negotiations by the US Medicare health program. Biden has signed the Inflation Reduction Act last year that allows Medicare to negotiate prices for some of its most costly drugs. Once implemented, the prices of some drugs will decrease for 9 million elderly citizens who pay over $6,500 per year on prescription drugs. The 10 initial drugs were chosen based on certain criteria set out by Medicare. Meanwhile, the German government has agreed upon a tax relief plan worth 7 billion euros per year for companies in a bid to revive the country's economy. The government said that the program would ease the burden on small and medium-sized enterprises. Germany recorded flat growth in the second quarter of 2023, having fallen into recession at the turn of the year. Moreover, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has also affected the German economy. The conflict has seen German energy prices surge after Berlin's reliance on Moscow for gas was brought to a halt. The new package is agreed for 4 years, with the tax cuts totaling to 32 billion euros. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said that a landmark referendum to change the constitution to recognise the country's indigenous people will be held on October 14th. Australians will be asked to vote on whether they support altering the constitution to include a voice to Parliament. This will be an Indigenous committee to advise federal Parliament on matters affecting the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. Australia has no treaty with its Indigenous people, who make up about 3.2% of its nearly 26 million population. Now, in the past, there have been 44 proposals for constitutional change in 19 referendums. However, only 8 of these have passed. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak welcomed Kuwait's Crown Prince Sheikh Mishal Al Ahmad Al Sabah at 10 Downing Street on Tuesday. Now, this marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the Kuwait Investment Office in London. During the meet, both the leaders signed a new UK-Kuwait investment partnership, which is set to drive investments into British industries. And this meeting comes weeks after Britain's Foreign Secretary met high-ranking officials in Kuwait during a 3-day tour of the Middle East. Now, UK is also set to launch a new streamlined visiting system for travellers from Qatar and other Gulf nations in October. Sudan's top military general is in Egypt on his first trip abroad since the country plunged into a bitter conflict earlier this year. Now, war broke out in Sudan last April after Sudan's military and the paramilitary forces exploded into fighting openly. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan was received by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the city of El Alamein. Both the leaders discussed Egypt's offer to mediate the conflict. Burhan is accompanied by the head of Sudanese intelligence and the interim foreign minister. Now, this trip comes at a time when rumors of negotiation between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary force are doing the rounds. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has urged Japan to release Tehran's frozen assets amid tightening US sanctions. Raisi went on to say that blocked Iranian funds were being held in South Korea. Raisi also stressed that Japan should act independently from the US and release around $1.5 billion of frozen funds. Now, recently, Tehran and Washington reached an agreement in which 5 US citizens held in Iran will be freed in exchange for $6 billion of Iranian assets frozen in South Korea. Zimbabwe's main opposition party, the Citizens Coalition for Change, has called for a fresh election after it disputed the result of last week's polls. Zimbabwe's Election Commission declared the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front leader and incumbent president Emerson Mnangagwa the winner of the polls.
The only resolution.
However, analysts and opposition parties have widely questioned the credibility of the result. South African Development Community and the European Union had both sent election observers to the country. Now, the SADC mission flagged voting delays, the banning of opposition rallies and biased state media coverage as concerns. On the other hand, the European Union said the election took place in a climate of fear. Heavy rains have swelled the Brahmaputra River in India's northeastern state of Assam, causing the river to inundate the nearby floodplains. Locals have been facing the wrath of rains as water barged into their houses, bringing life to a standstill. Now, according to reports, at least 15 people have died and almost 2 lakh people have been affected due to the floods. The continuous torrential rains have forced the locals to relocate to higher grounds. Heavy monsoons are a yearly occurrence in Assam, resulting in flooding and landslides, which force residents to flee their homes. Meanwhile, Hurricane Idalia continues to gain fury and is now expected to slam into Florida as an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm. More than 1.5 million people across 28 counties in Florida have been asked to evacuate because of the potential catastrophic impacts from the hurricane. According to the National Hurricane Center in the US, the hurricane is expected to landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast today. Florida's governor has declared a state of emergency. Idalia grew from a tropical storm into a hurricane early on Tuesday, a day after passing west of Cuba, where it damaged homes and flooded villages. About 5,500 National Guard members are mobilized, while 30,000 to 40,000 electricity workers are placed on standby. The European Union's Climate Change Service has now said that the wildfires burning in Greece for the past 11 days have destroyed an area larger than New York City. The fire has killed at least 20 people as of now and has turned out to be Europe's deadliest blaze this summer. Firefighters from Albania, Serbia, Slovakia and the Czech Republic are on the ground trying to douse the flames. Satellite images highlight the extent of the destruction in certain areas. Environmentalists have accused Greece of spending more funds on extinguishing fires than prevention of those. An adult lion escaped from a private vehicle amidst heavy traffic in southern Pakistani city of Karachi, causing panic for 2 hours before it was recaptured. The lion was being transported by its owner when it escaped on the main road of the bustling port city during peak traffic hours. The escaped lion had made its way into the basement of a nearby building after roaming on the road for some time. Now, the area saw a massive traffic jam with media vehicles arriving at the scene to cover the incident and crowds gathering to try to catch a glimpse of this escaped lion. In a very significant medical achievement, UK's National Health Service will be the first in the world to offer cancer jabs. Hundreds of cancer patients in the country would benefit from the injection that will cut their treatment time by up to 75%. Following an approval from the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, UK's NHS will be rolling out these jabs to hundreds of patients each year. Now, the jab is expected to slash drug treatment times for cancer patients significantly. The drug being talked about here is called atezolizumab, also known as Tecentriq. This is a life-extending immunotherapy for patients with several types of cancers, including lung, breast, liver, and bladder cancers. A 42-year-old man who was kidnapped at birth during the dictatorship rule in Chile and brought up by a family in the United States met his biological mother for the first time. The son and the mother found each other through an NGO called We Find Each Other. This NGO was created in 2014 to help people affected by irregular adoptions connect with their families. Now, Toyota has recovered from what is described as a malfunction in the production order system that halted production on 28 lines across 14 plants starting on Monday evening. The automaker is famous for its lean Toyota production system, which it feels is exceptionally reliable. The system means Toyota has very low inventories of components as they arrive almost at the moment they are needed to be fitted into vehicles. But when the production order system glitched, the system stopped. Now, Toyota isn't sure what happened, but claims it is not a victim of cyber attacks. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said that basket-based inflation was steady in the world's third largest economy, while prices of specific items like tomatoes or onions could be subjected to the effects of extreme rains in pockets where they are grown. The finance minister also expressed confidence that the Indian economy would continue to grow as people spent during the festive season and demand that situation remains robust beyond December. India has allowed traders to ship out their non-basmati white rice cargoes sitting at ports due to a sudden ban on exports of the category. On July 20th, India surprised buyers by banning exports of widely consumed non-basmati white rice to control rising domestic prices. The move followed a ban on broken rice exports last year. Now, the export ban trapped thousands of tons of non-basmati white rice at ports, leaving traders facing losses.